A homeless boy handed me a crumpled note that said, "Your daughter-in-law put something in your coffee. Don't drink it." My blood turned to ice. I looked down at the steaming mug in my hands, then back toward the boy already disappearing into the morning crowd. When I confronted Sarah about it later, she did something that changed everything forever. But first, let me take you back to how this all started. I'm Dorothy Wells, 68 years old, and I thought I knew my family. After my husband, Frank, passed away 6 months ago, I moved in with my son, Michael, and his wife, Sarah, in their beautiful suburban home in Denver. They insisted it would be temporary just until I got back on my feet. What a joke that turned out to be. That Tuesday morning began like any other. Sarah had made coffee, something she'd done every morning since I arrived. "Fresh pot for you, Dorothy," she'd say with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I should have noticed how she always handed me a specific mug, the blue one with tiny flowers. While she and Michael drank from plain white cups, I was sitting at their kitchen island, sipping what I now realize was my last innocent cup of coffee. When Sarah announced she was going grocery shopping, "Make yourself at home," she said, grabbing her designer purse. As if I could do anything else in a house where I felt like an unwelcome guest. 20 minutes later, I decided to walk to the corner store for a newspaper. Frank and I had read the morning paper together for 43 years, and old habits die hard. The autumn air was crisp, and for a moment I felt almost human again rather than the burden everyone seemed to think I was. That's when I saw him. A boy, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the steps of the abandoned building next to the convenience store. His clothes were dirty, his hair matted, and he clutched a torn backpack like it held everything he owned. When our eyes met, he stood up with an urgency that made my heart skip. "Ma'am," he called, his voice small but determined. "Ma'am, please wait." I stopped, something in his tone cutting through my usual caution around strangers. He approached slowly, as if afraid I might run, and pressed a piece of paper into my palm. His hands were cold and trembling. "Don't drink the coffee," he whispered, his young face serious beyond his years. "The lady with the yellow hair, she put something in it. I seen her." Before I could ask what he meant or even get his name, he was gone, running down the street like his life depended on it, leaving me standing there with a crumpled note and a growing sense of dread. I stared at the paper until the words blurred, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold it steady. The boy's handwriting was shaky but clear. "Your daughter-in-law put something in your coffee. Don't drink it." Below that, in smaller letters, I watched from the alley. "She don't know." My mind raced back over the past few weeks, how tired I'd been every morning, more exhausted than grief alone could explain. How I'd been sleeping until almost noon, something I'd never done in my life. The dizzy spells Sarah always attributed to my age or emotional state. "You're just having a hard time adjusting, Dorothy," she'd say in that concerned voice that sounded so sincere. "Maybe you should see Dr. Morrison about something to help you sleep better." But I had been sleeping like the dead, so deeply I barely remembered my dreams and woke up groggy and disoriented. Frank used to joke that I was the lightest sleeper in Colorado, able to hear a pin drop 3 rooms away. Yet lately, I could barely drag myself out of bed before lunch. I bought my newspaper with trembling hands, the teenage cashier giving me a worried look as I fumbled with my change. The walk home felt endless, each step heavy with a growing certainty that my son's wife had been poisoning me. But why? What could she possibly gain from keeping me sedated? Back at the house, I found my blue mug exactly where I'd left it, still half full of coffee. It looked innocent enough, smelled perfectly normal, but the boy's warning echoed in my head. I picked it up and walked to the kitchen sink, my heart pounding as if I were about to commit a crime. I poured the coffee down the drain and watched it swirl away, feeling like I was washing my own innocence down with it. How long had this been happening? How many mornings had I blindly sipped whatever Sarah was slipping into my cup? When she came back from grocery shopping an hour later, I was sitting in the living room with my newspaper, pretending everything was normal while my stomach churned with fear and betrayal. "How was your walk?" she asked, setting down bags that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. "Fine," I said evenly, forcing a calm smile. "Refreshing. Good. You didn't finish your coffee this morning. Are you feeling all right?" Her voice carried concern, but now I could hear something else beneath it: calculation. She was testing me, gauging whether I'd noticed anything. "Just wasn't in the mood for it today," I replied casually. "Maybe I'm finally breaking my caffeine habit." Something flickered across her face, too quick to name. "Well, that's probably for the best. Too much caffeine isn't good for someone your age anyway." Someone my age. As if 68 made me frail instead of wise enough to recognize when I was being played. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, my room now, I supposed, staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. The house was quiet except for the usual sounds, the TV murmuring from their bedroom, Water rushing through the pipes, the soft creaks of a house settling into sleep. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt clear, sharp. The fog that had been clouding my thoughts was finally lifting. And with that clarity came a terrifying understanding of how vulnerable I'd become. Memories resurfaced, fragments of hushed conversations between Michael and Sarah that had always stopped when I entered the room. I'd dismissed them as normal marital chatter, but now they came back with a new, chilling meaning. She can't stay here forever, Michael. I know, but what are we supposed to do? She's my mother. There are facilities, nice ones. She'd probably be happier with people her own age. Facilities. They'd been planning to put me in a nursing home, and Sarah had been drugging me to make me seem confused and incapable. To make it easier for Michael to agree, the realization hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened with betrayal. Michael, my baby boy. The child I'd rocked through endless sleepless nights, cheered through every baseball game, every graduation. He was letting his wife poison me to make their plan easier. I must have drifted into a restless sleep, because I woke to the smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. My body told me it was around 7 a.m., my natural wake-up time, back when I still lived in my own home, when I had a life instead of existing as someone else's burden. I dressed quietly and stepped into the kitchen. Sarah was already there in her silk robe and expensive slippers. She looked up, and for a split second, I swear I saw disappointment flash across her face before she put on her practiced morning smile. "You're up early today," she said, reaching for my blue mug with the ease of routine. "Must be feeling better." "Much better, actually," I replied, accepting the coffee. Clearer than I have in weeks, I raised the mug to my lips, pretending to take a sip while only letting the liquid brush my mouth. I watched her carefully. She relaxed slightly and turned back to pour her own cup. "That's wonderful, Dorothy. Michael will be so pleased to hear you're improving, as if my mental clarity were a medical condition instead of the natural result of not being drugged into submission." I excused myself to use the bathroom, dumping the coffee down the sink and rinsing the mug until every drop was gone. When I returned, Sarah was gone, but her voice floated down from upstairs. "She seems more alert today," I heard her say. "Maybe we should increase the dosage." Increase the dosage. Those 3 words hit me like a slap, confirming what I already knew but had prayed was just paranoid thinking. My own family was poisoning me systematically, and they were talking about it as casually as if they were adjusting a prescription. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, my newspaper forgotten, trying to steady my breathing and figure out what to do next. The next few days became a carefully planned dance of deception. Every morning, Sarah handed me my coffee with that flawless smile, and every morning I pretended to drink it while secretly pouring it down a sink. When she wasn't looking, I became an expert at excuses, bathroom breaks, laundry checks, anything to get near running water. With each day that passed without their dosage, my mind grew sharper, my energy returned, and my anger hardened into something cold and deliberate. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was gathering evidence. I started watching their routines, their conversations, their assumptions about my supposed confusion. Sarah clearly believed I was too out of it to notice anything, and that worked to my advantage. One afternoon, while I pretended to nap in the living room, I heard her on the phone with her sister. "It's getting worse," she said casually, as though describing the weather. "She's more confused every day. Michael's finally coming around to the idea that we need professional help." Professional help. Another soft phrase for locking me away somewhere. "The place in Lakewood has an opening next month," she continued. "It's expensive, but it's not like she's going to live forever. Her savings will cover it for a few years, and after that, well, that's what Medicaid is for." My savings. The money Frank and I had scrimped and saved for 43 years, sacrificing vacations, luxuries, and little indulgences so we could have security in our old age. And here they were, already spending it in their minds, calculating how long it would last and what they'd do when it ran out. I forced my breathing to remain slow and steady, keeping up the charade of sleep while my blood boiled. This wasn't just about getting me out of their house. They were planning to take everything Frank and I had built and convinced themselves they were doing me a favor. That evening, Michael sat beside me on the couch while Sarah was upstairs. For a moment, he looked like the little boy I'd raised, hesitant, almost sad. "Mom," he said softly, "I want you to know that whatever happens, I love you." The words should have comforted me, but instead they felt like a goodbye. Like he was mourning the mother he was about to betray. "I love you too, sweetheart," I said warmly, patting his hand. "You'll always be my baby boy." He smiled faintly, but it never reached his eyes. "Sarah thinks maybe it's time we talk to Dr. Morrison about your options. She's worried about you living independently." "What kind of options?" I asked, tilting my head with the practiced confusion of the helpless older woman they thought I was. "Just different living situations," he said. Places where you could have more support, more social interaction with people your own age. People my own age. As if age were a disease that required isolation. That sounds expensive, I said. Watching him closely, don't worry about that. Mom, we'll figure it out, with my money. I thought bitterly, but I kept my face calm. The savings account Frank and I had built, dollar by dollar, was their ticket to a guilt-free eviction. Friday morning brought an unexpected opening. Sarah announced she was going to her sister's house to deal with some custody crisis. That required her unique brand of drama. Michael had already left for a business trip to Phoenix and wouldn't be back until Sunday night. For the first time in months, I was completely alone. I waited until Sarah's car disappeared down the street, then moved with a focus I hadn't felt in years. Whatever she'd been slipping into my coffee was somewhere in this house, and I was going to find it. I started in the kitchen, methodically searching every cabinet, every drawer, every possible hiding place. Nothing seemed unusual until I reached the high shelf where Sarah kept her specialty items. Exotic spices, expensive extracts. The things she used to impress dinner guests with her culinary flair. Behind a fancy bottle of Madagascar vanilla extract, I found a small amber vial with no label. The liquid inside the vial was clear and odorless. But when I held it up to the light, it shimmered with a slightly thicker consistency than water. My hands trembled as I unscrewed the cap and sniffed carefully. Nothing, whatever this was. It was designed to be undetectable. I took pictures of everything with my phone, the vial, its location, the surrounding items, then replaced it exactly as I'd found it and continued searching. In Sarah's bathroom, hidden behind rows of expensive face creams and serums, I discovered internet printouts about liquid melatonin for elderly patients. The dosages listed were far higher than anything recommended for normal sleep aid. These were amounts meant to heavily sedate someone enough to keep them confused and compliant. More pictures, more evidence. My phone was becoming a catalog of my own attempted poisoning. But the real discovery waited in Michael's home office. In a locked desk drawer that wasn't as secure as he believed, I struck gold. I'd given him that desk for Christmas 5 years ago and remembered the extra key that came with it. Frank had taught me to keep track of such details. Inside, I found brochures for 3 different assisted living facilities, places that looked more like luxury prisons than homes. I found printouts of my bank statements accessed without my knowledge. I found a consultation report from an elder care attorney, detailing incapacity proceedings and guardianship options. They'd been planning this for months while I grieved my husband and struggled to adjust to widowhood. My own son and his wife were quietly plotting to have me declared incompetent, so they could control my finances and my life. The final piece of evidence stopped me cold, a half-written letter to my doctor, signed by Michael, expressing concerns about my mother's increasing confusion and inability to care for herself. It described incidents that never happened, symptoms I'd never shown, all carefully constructed to build a case for institutionalizing me. For my own safety, I photographed everything. My hands were steady now, steady with cold fury. They thought they were dealing with a confused old woman too foggy to notice what was happening. They had no idea they'd awakened something far more dangerous, a mother who had just realized her own child was betraying her. As I carefully returned everything to its place, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Sarah was back early. Heart racing, I made it to the living room just as the front door opened, settling into my chair with the newspaper in hand, pretending I'd been dozing peacefully all afternoon. "Dorothy," Sarah called cheerfully, "I'm back. How was your day?" "Quiet," I said, keeping my voice even. I didn't trust myself to say more. Inside, I was already planning. And for the first time since Frank died, I felt like myself again. Saturday morning arrived with the promise of reckoning. I woke before dawn, my mind crystal clear and my resolve unshakable. Today, I would confront them. Today, the careful deception would end. I dressed in my best outfit, the navy blue dress Frank had always loved, the one that made me feel dignified and strong. If I was going to tear my family apart, I would do it looking like a woman who commanded respect. Sarah was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, moving through her morning routine with mechanical precision. She looked up, and I caught that familiar flicker of disappointment when she saw me dressed and alert instead of shuffling around in my bathrobe like I had for weeks. "You look nice today, Dorothy," she said, reaching for my blue mug. "Special occasion," I replied, accepting the coffee and wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. "We need to talk." Something in my tone made her pause, coffee pot still in hand. "Oh, about what?" I pulled out my phone and held up the first photograph, the amber vial hidden behind her vanilla extract. "About this." The color drained from Sarah's face so fast I thought she might faint. The coffee pot slipped from her hand and shattered on the kitchen floor, sending hot coffee and shards of ceramic everywhere. I don't know what you think you're looking at, she said. But the artificial sweetness in her voice was gone. I think I'm looking at evidence that you've been drugging me for weeks, I said calmly. Every morning in my coffee. Liquid melatonin in doses high enough to keep me sedated and confused. Sarah's mask finally dropped, revealing the calculating woman beneath. You're being paranoid, Dorothy. That's just vanilla extract. I swiped to the next photo, the printouts about elderly sedation. Then the next, the assisted living brochures. Her eyes widened with each image, the reality of her situation sinking in. Where did you get those? She whispered, from your bathroom. From your husband's office. From all the places you thought I was too drugged to look, I said, standing now. Still holding my untouched coffee. Did you really think I wouldn't notice eventually? Or were you planning to increase the dosage until I was too far gone to figure it out? The silence between us stretched like a canyon. Finally, Sarah let out a laugh, sharp and humorless. You want the truth, Dorothy? Fine, yes, I've been giving you something to help you sleep. Yes, Michael, and I think you need more care than we can provide. And yes, we've been looking into options for your future. My future, I repeated slowly. You mean my money? Something ugly flickered in her eyes. Your money won't last forever, especially not in those expensive facilities. Someone has to think practically about these things. Someone like me. Someone who isn't blinded by sentiment and denial about what's best for everyone involved. I walked to the kitchen sink and, without breaking eye contact, poured my coffee down the drain. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning to face her. You're going to stop poisoning me. You're going to stop planning my life without my consent. And you're going to explain to Michael exactly what you've been doing when he gets home tomorrow. Sarah gave a bitter little laugh. Or what? You'll tell him yourself. Who do you think he's going to believe, his wife? Or his confused mother who's clearly becoming paranoid and delusional? I smiled, and something in my expression made her instinctively step back. Oh, Sarah, I said softly. You have no idea what you've awakened. Sunday evening brought Michael home from Phoenix. From my bedroom window, I watched his car pull into the driveway. Sarah had spent the entire weekend tiptoeing around me, clearly unsure whether I'd follow through on my threat. She was about to find out. I'd prepared for this confrontation the way a general prepares for battle. Every piece of evidence was organized on my phone, every argument rehearsed, every possible response anticipated. Frank used to say I was like a dog with a bone once I set my mind to something. Tonight, that stubborn streak would serve me well. Mom? Michael called as he stepped inside, his voice carrying the false cheer of someone expecting a manageable situation. How was your weekend? Enlightening, I said, descending the stairs with steady, purposeful steps. We need to have a family meeting. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, her face pale but composed. She'd clearly spent the weekend crafting her own narrative. Michael, honey, she said, moving to his side with practiced ease. Your mother had some kind of episode yesterday. She's been acting paranoid, making accusations. I think we need to call Dr. Morrison. I almost admired the tactic. Strike first. Paint me as the unreliable narrator before I could present my case. But she'd underestimated how sharp my mind had become without her chemical fog. What kind of accusations? Michael asked, looking between us, concern flickering across his face. The kind that come with evidence, I said, pulling out my phone. Sit down, son. Both of you. Something in my tone left no room for argument. Michael sat on the couch, Sarah beside him, their body language already defensive. I started with the amber vial, showing them the photo and explaining how I'd found it hidden in the kitchen. Sarah immediately tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand. I'm not finished, I said. This is liquid melatonin, purchased online in doses far exceeding anything meant for normal sleep aid. These are doses intended to sedate elderly patients into compliance. Michael's face went white. Mom, that's impossible. Sarah wouldn't what? I cut in. Wouldn't drug your mother to make her appear incompetent? So you could justify putting her in a nursing home? I swiped to the next photo, brochures for assisted living facilities. Michael's expression shifted from disbelief to recognition to something that looked like shame. We were just looking at options, he said weakly. In case your condition deteriorated. My condition, I repeated, my voice like steel. You mean the condition your wife was creating by poisoning my coffee every morning? Sarah finally found her voice. Michael, don't listen to her. She's having delusions. This is exactly what I was talking about, really? I interrupted again, holding up another photo. Am I delusional about this letter you wrote to Dr. Morrison documenting incidents that never happened? Or this consultation with an elder care attorney about having me declared incompetent? The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stared at the screen, his face cycling through too many emotions to name. Finally, he looked at Sarah, his voice low but sharp. Tell me this isn't true. Sarah's composure cracked. Michael, you know how confused she's been getting. Someone had to think about the future, about what was best for everyone, by drugging her. Michael's voice rose, sharp with disbelief. By making her sick so we could justify taking control of her life? We weren't making her sick. We were helping her get the rest she needed. She was grieving, not sleeping well, Sarah shot back. Bullshit, I said. And both of them stared at me. I don't think I'd cursed in front of Michael since he was a teenager. You were systematically sedating me to make me appear incapable of caring for myself. And you were doing it so you could access my savings account. Michael looked like he'd been slapped. Your savings, Mom? You never check my bank records, son? I leaned forward. Someone's been monitoring my accounts. Someone's been calculating how long my money would last in those expensive facilities. Someone's been planning my entire future without ever asking me what I wanted. Michael shot to his feet, running his hands through his hair, a move I'd seen since he was a boy caught in a lie. This is insane. Sarah, tell me you didn't actually drug my mother. Sarah's face hardened into defiance. I gave her something to help her sleep. She was having such a hard time after your father died. I thought if she could just rest better, get her strength back. For weeks, I cut in. You've been drugging me for weeks, making me so groggy I could barely function. Making your husband think I was losing my mind. You were losing your mind, Sarah snapped. Her careful fade finally cracking. Wandering around the house at all hours, crying, not eating properly. Someone had to take control of the situation. Someone had to take control of my bank account. You mean? Michael's head whipped toward his wife. What bank account, Sarah? What is she talking about? I watched the calculation flicker in Sarah's eyes as she weighed how much to admit. Your mother is almost 70, Michael. She's living on a fixed income, vulnerable to scams, not thinking clearly about her finances. I was trying to protect her by accessing my accounts without permission. I interrupted. By researching how long my savings would last in a nursing home. The betrayal on Michael's face was almost painful to watch. This was his wife, the woman he trusted with everything, and she'd been lying to him. As much as she'd been lying to me. Show me, he said quietly. I pulled up the photos on my phone, my bank statements. The ones I'd found in his office with handwritten calculations and Sarah's neat script numbers, showing exactly how long my savings would last in various facilities. Cold, clinical math for disposing of an inconvenient elderly relative. Jesus Christ, Sarah, Michael whispered. These are Mom's private financial records. How did you even get these? I have your power of attorney for her accounts, Sarah said, though her voice lacked conviction. No, I said firmly. You don't. Frank and I never gave anyone power of attorney over our finances. We were very careful about that. Michael's face flushed red. Then how? I may have used your login information, Sarah admitted, her words tumbling out. The bank's website. You showed me how to access it once when you were helping your mother with her online banking. The silence that followed was so deep I could hear a neighbor's dog barking 3 houses away. Michael stared at his wife like she was a stranger. You used my identity to access my mother's bank accounts without her consent, he said slowly. As if trying to process an impossible equation, I was trying to plan for her future. You were committing fraud, I said coldly. And identity theft. And elder abuse. Should I keep going? Sarah's composure finally shattered. Fine, you want the truth? Yes, I've been giving you something to help you sleep. Yes, I've been monitoring your finances. Yes, I've been researching care facilities because someone had to think practically about this situation. She shot to her feet, pacing the room, hands slicing the air as she spoke. Do you have any idea what it's like having you in our house? The constant depression, the crying, the way you make everyone feel guilty just by existing. Michael works 70 hours a week trying to support this family. And he comes home to his mother mourning all over everything. The cruelty in her voice stole my breath, but I forced myself to stay calm. So your solution? I said evenly. Was to drug me until I was compliant enough to warehouse. My solution, she spat. Was to help you transition to a place where you could get proper care, without destroying our marriage in the process. Michael had gone completely still, the kind of stillness that comes just before something explodes. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Get out. Sarah stopped pacing. What? Get out of this house, now, tonight. Michael, you're overreacting. We can work through this. You drugged my mother. The words exploded out of him, a roar that seemed to shake the windows. You violated her bank accounts. You forged documents. You've been systematically abusing an elderly woman. And that woman is my mother. I watched my daughter-in-law's face cycle through shock, anger, and finally cold calculation. This wasn't going the way she'd planned. If I leave, I'm taking half of everything, she said flatly. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts. I've been married to you for 15 years, Michael. I'm entitled to half. Michael's laugh was bitter. Half of what? The mortgage payments you plan to fund with my mother's savings? The retirement accounts you've been calculating how to access once she was safely locked away. For the first time since this confrontation began, Sarah looked genuinely afraid. The next few hours passed in a blur: phone calls, legal threats, and the kind of ugly family drama I'd hoped never to experience. Sarah called her sister, her mother, and finally a lawyer, all while packing her belongings with the efficiency of someone who'd clearly prepared for this possibility. Michael sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, looking like a man whose entire world had just collapsed. Which, I suppose, it had. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said for what must have been the 12th time. "I had no idea. I should have seen it. Should have known something was wrong." "How could you have known?" I asked, pouring him a cup of coffee. She was very good at what she did. Professional level manipulation. But the signs were all there the way you thought I was sleeping so much. How confused I seemed some days. "I just thought it was grief," he murmured. I sat down across from him, studying his face. My son looked older than his 42 years. Worn down by guilt and betrayal. "Michael, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me." He looked up, eyes red-rimmed but alert. "How much of this did you actually agree with? Not the drugging, I know you didn't know about that, but the nursing home idea. Taking control of my finances. How much of that was your idea?" Michael was silent for a long moment, wrestling with the truth. "Some of it," he admitted finally. "Not the details, not the specific plans. But Sarah convinced me you weren't capable of living independently anymore. She said you were getting confused, forgetting things, that it was dangerous for you to be alone. And you believed her." "She's a nurse," Mom was, before she quit to focus on interior design. "I trusted her medical opinion." "Her medical opinion," I repeated. "That your 68-year-old mother needed to be institutionalized after 6 months of widowhood." He flinched. "When you put it like that, it sounds insane." "It is insane. I'm not some doddering old fool, Michael. I'm a woman who lost her husband of 43 years and needed time to grieve, not a medical diagnosis." From upstairs came the sound of Sarah's heels clicking across the hardwood floor, followed by the thump of suitcases being dragged. She was really leaving after 15 years of marriage. She was walking away because her plan to control my life had been exposed. "What happens now?" Michael asked quietly. "Now you decide what kind of man you want to be," I said. "The kind who lets his wife abuse his mother, or the kind who protects his family?" "I want to protect you, Mom, but I don't know how to undo this. The damage to our relationship, to our trust." "Trust is earned," I interrupted. "And it can be earned again if you're willing to do the work." Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, two large suitcases in tow. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the exposure of her true nature. "I'll be staying at my sister's while my lawyer sorts this out," she announced. "Don't think this is over, Michael. I've invested 15 years in this marriage and I'm not walking away empty-handed." "You're walking away with your freedom," I said calmly. "Considering what you've done, that's more generous than you deserve." Her eyes flashed with hatred. "You sanctimonious old, you think you've won something here? You've destroyed my marriage, my life. I've exposed your crimes," I corrected. "There's a difference. Michael won't choose you over me. He's my husband." Michael stood up slowly, his face set in hard, unfamiliar lines. "You're right, Sarah," he said evenly. "I am your husband. Was your husband. But she's my mother. And what you did to her is unforgivable." Sarah's face flickered through a storm of emotions: shock, fury, disbelief, each one flashing and fading like lightning across a dark sky. Shock, rage, disbelief, and finally, cold acceptance. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice icy. "Both of you." She turned and walked toward the front door, her heels striking the hardwood with sharp, deliberate clicks that echoed through the house one last time. The door slammed behind her with a finality that seemed to shake the walls. Michael and I sat in the sudden silence, struggling to process the enormity of what had just happened. "I feel like I don't know anything anymore," he said quietly. "You know what's right and what's wrong," I replied. "That's enough to start with." 3 weeks later, I stood in the kitchen making coffee for two, real coffee, poured into matching mugs. No hidden additives, no secret agendas. Michael had taken a leave of absence from work to help me sort through the legal mess Sarah had left behind. And together we were slowly rebuilding something that resembled a normal relationship. The divorce proceedings were as ugly as I'd expected. Sarah's lawyer initially tried to argue that I was an unreliable witness because of my so-called documented cognitive decline. But Michael's attorney countered with medical evidence proving I'd been systematically drugged. The supposed decline? Entirely artificial. The elder abuse charges were far more serious. Sarah now faced potential jail time for drugging me, committing financial fraud, and stealing my identity. Her nursing license had been suspended pending investigation. The perfect life she'd been so desperate to protect was crumbling around her. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source, Mom, Michael said, walking into the kitchen with his phone in hand. "You're not going to believe this." That was Detective Martinez. "They want to talk to you about the homeless boy." I looked up from the coffee maker. "What about him?" "Apparently, he's not just any homeless kid. His name is Tommy Chen. He's 11 years old and he's been missing from the foster care system for 3 months. They found him yesterday." My heart clenched. "Is he okay?" "He's fine. Better than fine, actually." "But Mom, you're not going to believe what he told them about how he knew to warn you." I set my coffee mug down, giving Michael my full attention. "He's been living in that abandoned building for weeks, watching the neighborhood. He saw Sarah putting something in your coffee cup every morning when she thought no one was looking. And he recognized what she was doing, because his previous foster mother used to drug him the same way." The words hit me like a physical blow. "His foster mother drugged him," Michael continued. "Liquid melatonin in massive doses to keep him quiet and compliant. The same thing Sarah was doing to you. When he saw her tampering with your coffee, he knew exactly what was happening." I pictured that brave little boy living on the streets, watching a stranger being abused and deciding to risk himself to help her. "Where is he now?" I asked. "Child Protective Services has him temporarily," Michael said, hesitating. "But Mom, he asked if he could see you again. He wants to know if you're okay." "Of course I want to see him," I said without hesitation. "That child saved my life." "There's more," Michael added. "The investigators found evidence that his foster family was running a medication scam, drugging multiple children to keep them manageable while collecting state payments. Tommy's testimony is going to help put them away." I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the ripple effects of one boy's courage. "He saved more than just me," I whispered. "He did," Michael agreed. Then he paused, his expression uncertain. "And Mom, I've been thinking. Our house has plenty of room. If you wanted to look into becoming a foster parent or even adopting." I stared at my son, seeing something in his face I hadn't seen in years: hope, purpose, the desire to do something meaningful instead of just profitable. "You'd be okay with that? Having both an elderly mother and a foster child in your house?" Michael's smile was the first genuine one I'd seen from him in months. "I think we could all use a fresh start. And Tommy's already proved he's got good instincts about protecting family." The word family hung in the air between us, fragile, but full of possibility. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen making coffee for 3. Tommy Chen sat at the table working on his homework, his reading glasses sliding down his nose as he concentrated on a math problem upstairs. Michael was getting ready for work, humming off-key the way he used to when he was a child. The house felt alive again, filled with the kind of noise and chaos that comes from real family-chosen family. The kind built on love and protection rather than obligation and manipulation. Tommy had been with us for 4 months now, officially in our care as foster parents while the adoption paperwork moved through the system. He was nothing like the scared, homeless boy I'd first met that morning outside the convenience store. Proper food, regular sleep, and the security of knowing he was wanted had transformed Tommy into the brilliant, funny, occasionally exasperating 11-year-old he was always meant to be. "Dorothy," he said, not looking up from his math workbook, "can you help me with number 7? I keep getting the wrong answer." I walked over and studied his paper, noticing the careful way he'd shown each step. "You're doing everything right, sweetheart. But you made a small error here in the multiplication." He erased and recalculated, his face lighting up when the new answer came out right. "Thanks. You're way better at explaining this stuff than my last foster mom." It was the first time he'd mentioned his previous placement in weeks. Therapy was helping, slowly teaching him that not all adults would hurt him, that this new life was real and permanent. Michael came into the kitchen, straightening his tie. The past few months had changed him too, giving him a purpose beyond just earning money. He'd started volunteering with a local organization that helps children in foster care, using his business skills to help families navigate the system. "Big day today," he announced. The final adoption hearing. Tommy looked up from his homework, his expression carefully neutral. He'd learned early not to get too excited about good news, but I could see the hope flickering behind his eyes. "Whatever happens," I told him, "you're staying with us. This is your home now, even if the adoption doesn't go through." "Even if it doesn't," Michael echoed, "though I don't think we need to worry. Judge Henderson already indicated she's inclined to approve it." After breakfast, we all piled into Michael's car for the drive to the courthouse. Tommy was unusually quiet, but he held my hand tightly as we walked through the halls where his future would be decided. The hearing itself was surprisingly brief. Judge Henderson asked Tommy if he understood what adoption meant, if he was sure he wanted Michael and me to be his legal family. His answer was simple and perfect. They already are my family. This just makes it official when the judge signed the papers. Tommy Chen became Tommy Wells, not just our foster child, but our son and grandson, legally and forever, outside the courthouse. Tommy looked up at me with those serious eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. Dorothy, can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. If I hadn't warned you about the coffee that day, what do you think would have happened? I considered carefully. Sarah's plan had been thorough, methodical. Without Tommy's intervention, I might very well have ended up exactly where she wanted me, sedated, confused, and helpless in some expensive facility while my own savings paid for my imprisonment, I think. I said finally that you saved us all. Not just me, but Michael too, and yourself. Sometimes when people are drowning, they can't see the way to shore until someone throws them a rope. He nodded solemnly, then surprised me with a grin. So, we all saved each other, I agreed. As we drove home through the suburban streets where all of this began, I thought about the homeless boy who had risked himself to help a stranger, the son who had found the courage to choose right over easy, and the new family we'd built from the ashes of betrayal. Sarah's plan had been to make me disappear, to erase my independence and my dignity in service of her comfortable life. Instead, her cruelty had led to the creation of something beautiful, a family bound not just by genetics, but by the conscious choice to protect and love one another. That evening, as I tucked Tommy into the bed that was now officially his room, he looked up at me with a sleepy smile. "Good night, Grandma Dorothy," he said. It was the first time he'd called me Grandma, and the word hit my heart like a gentle explosion of joy. "Good night, sweetheart," I replied. "Sweet dreams." As I turned off his light and headed to my own room, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us all here. It had started with betrayal and drugged coffee, with a homeless child's courage and a family torn apart by greed. But it had ended with healing, justice, and the kind of love that chooses to see the best in people, even when they're at their worst. I was Dorothy Wells, 70-year-old grandmother, mother, and survivor. And for the first time since Frank died, I was exactly where I belonged. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.